Today is, let's see, October 24th, and it's 1 o'clock Eastern Time. And this is our day, Tuesday, for Aesop's Fables. Today we're going to study two fables, the mole and her dam, and then the falconer and the partridge. I don't know off the top of my head what number these are. I think it's like 104, around there, around 104, 103, 104. Okay, so the mole and her dam is the first one, and then the falconer and the partridge. So let's just jump right into this. Let's cut off chat for now, okay? Let's get to our study, and then we can chat later. So let me share my screen. We can pick up chatting later on if you want to. All right, so the first fable here is the fable of the mole and her dam. Before we get started, does anybody know what a mole is? What is a mole? What is a mole? The mole and her dam. What is a mole? Anybody know what a mole is? Come on, stick to the lesson here, or I'm just going to start knocking people out of the room. A mole is a ground-digging creature. That's good. Okay, that's good. A ground-digging creature. It's a mammal, animal that lives under the ground. A rodent who lives underground. That's a good definition right there. A rodent who lives underground. Big or small? Are moles big animals or small animals? Big or small? What do you know about moles? Small. What do you know about moles? Do you know anything specific about moles? Like, why in the world would Aesop be writing about a mole here? Anything interesting about moles? They can't see, George says. Connor says they can't see. They ruin the ground. They dig holes. All right, so you say they can't see, right? They can smell very well, Connor says. They can't see, Luke says. All right, so we've got some agreement here that they can't see, right? So let's keep that in mind as we get to our fable. All right, so let's read the fable of the mole and her dam. 1 second. I think some more kids are trying to get in. All right, the mole and her dam. So let's read this together. Pay attention here. Pay attention to all the details, okay? A young mole, pay attention to the word young, right? A young mole snuffed up her nose and told her dam, you might not know what dam is here, but we're going to realize in just a second what it is. Young mole snuffed up her nose and told her dam that she smelt an odd kind of smell. By and by, that means after a little while, by and by, "Oh, mother," said she, "what a noise there is in my ears, as if 10,000 paper mills were going." And then again, soon after, she said, "Look, look, mother, what is that I see yonder? It is just like the flame of a fiery furnace." The dam replied, "Prithee, child," that means I pray you, right? Or please. It's like saying, "Please, child, prithee, child, hold your idle tongue. And if you would have us allow you any sense at all, do not pretend to more than nature has given to you." There's the fable of the mole and her dam. Let's go through it one more time just to get all the details. So a young mole snuffed up her nose and told her dam. What is the dam? What is a dam in this fable here? What does that mean? The mole and her dam. Good. Dam is a mother. How do you know that? How do you know that the dam is her mother? How do you know that? Because of context? Give me some details. How do you know that the dam is her mother? How do we know that? Very good, George. It says so, right? Next sentence. She told her dam that she smelt an odd kind of smell. And then in the next sentence, we read, "Oh, mother," said she. So we see the context tells us that the dam is a mother. So again, that's another lesson for you of how when you come across an unfamiliar word when you're reading, just relax and keep reading, because usually the context will help you understand what the word means. So a young mole snuffed up her nose and told her dam that she smelt an odd kind of smell, smelt something funny. By and by, after a little while, "Oh, mother," said she, "what a noise there is in my ears, as if 10,000 paper mills were going." And then again, soon after, she said, "Look, look, mother, what is that I see yonder?" Yonder means over there, like in the distance. Over yonder, over there. "Look, look, mother, what is that I see yonder? It is just like the flame of a fiery furnace." And then, after she got done, the dam replied and said, "Prithee, child, or please, child, hold your idle tongue. Be quiet. If you would have us allow you any sense at all, do not pretend to more than nature has given you." Okay, so there's the fable. We already said the mole is like a small rat-like creature that digs in the ground, can't see well. Um, Scientists today say they're not actually blind. They have eyes, but they don't see very well. Really, they think that their eyes are just for recognizing light, because they live underground. They can recognize light, but they can't see very well. But they do have eyes, so they can't see well. They have noses, they can smell, they have ears, they can hear, but they can't see well. So what we have here is this young mole. It's important to recognize the mole is young. It's like a child. Just follow me here. All right. Chill out with chat. A young mole, like a child talking to a parent, saying, "Oh, I smell something. What's that smell? What's this noise that I hear in my ears? Look, look, what's that over there?" And the mother says, "Would you be quiet?" Right? The mother stops the child. "Would you be quiet?" And kids do this to parents all the time. I know my kids do it to me. They'll say something like, they'll make a comment about something that's obvious. Like, I have eyes too. I have ears. I can smell. If you can see it, I can probably see it. If you hear it, I probably hear it. If you smell it, I probably smell it. But so the children, the young person often thinks that they see or know or discern something that the older person doesn't, whereas the older person has the same senses that they have. And really, they just need to be quiet. And then the child, though, goes even further and says, "I actually think I see something too." So, and you see, the child is just now going to give advice based on what she sees when she's not even good at seeing. So it's just the child trying to get attention and trying to act like a know-it-all, trying to pretend like it's got some knowledge of something that the mother doesn't have. And so finally, the mother responds and says, "Please, child, be quiet," right? "Prithee, child, hold your idle tongue. Stop this nonsense talk. If you would have us allow you any sense at all," what that means is that if you don't want us to think that you're dumb, if you want us to think that you're smart or that you have something helpful to say, if you want us to think that you have some sense, do not pretend to have more sense than nature has given to you. So the young mole, is acting contrary to nature. The way she's acting contrary to nature is by thinking that she needs to, give direction and advice to her mother, first of all. And then in order to, pretend that she's got some like secret knowledge that the mother doesn't know, she appeals to her senses, which the mother has all the same senses. So that doesn't make any sense. And then she even finally appeals to her sight, and she's not even good at seeing. That's not what moles can even do. So you just see the fable here shows us a young person who doesn't even have as good faculties or senses as the older person, trying to pretend that they know something that the older person doesn't know. And the older person saying, "Be quiet. If you were actually wise, if you were actually intelligent, you would know that I already know what you know. I can sense everything you can sense. Don't pretend to have more than nature has given to you." Okay. So the moral of the fable, the moral of this fable, the moral lesson is to act in a way that agrees with nature. Okay. Don't pretend to more than nature has given you. Okay. And what does nature here mean? I know what most people will think nature means, but what does nature mean in philosophy? What does nature mean? Notice it's a capital N, nature. Yeah, I think some of you are on the right track. So um, you can say it's God, right? Because God is the creator and he created things a certain way, right? He created things to have their own nature. And what that means, nature means the natural power or natural order that God establishes in things. Okay. So for example, if you make a delicious meal and feed it to your dog, that's contrary to nature because dogs are not intended to eat quality food off the table. Sometimes it'll even make dogs sick because you're acting contrary to nature. Nature is the rule that God has built into things. Yesterday in sacred scripture, we studied Genesis 1. We talked about how God made man and told man to rule over all the created things. Well, we're to rule over them according to this nature, right? According to nature. So we're to study things to learn how they work, how God designed them to work, what God designed them for. And then we're supposed to work to keep them in their place, to put them in their place and keep them in their place. So if you're a child in a family, it's not your place to give advice to people. It's not your place to make rules, right? It's not your place to make the rules. It's not your place to give advice. And that doesn't mean you're a slave. It's just not the right time. You're a child. That means you're growing and developing. You're developing and growing, and one day you're going to be an adult. You're going to have the time to make your own rules and have your own life and your own house and decide things for yourself. But when you're a child, it's not time for that. So to be a child giving advice and counsel to adults is not natural. And that's what this fable is showing us. And then so what a child might do is pretend like they do have some special knowledge. And the truth is we don't have special knowledge. Let's stick with the lesson here. Don't get silly. Okay, so the moral of this fable is do not pretend. It's stated right in the last sentence there. Do not pretend to have more than nature has given you. So you're not given great eyesight, and you're talking about seeing things. You're young and you're giving advice to older people. You're not acting naturally. Stay within the limits of nature. Okay, any questions about that fable? Pretty simple. Pretty simple. You can think of good applications, right? Think of good applications. Like, don't assume you know more than your parents. They've already been children. They've already gone through all of your experiences. They've already been through school. Obviously, all of them are already been through marriages. They know what they're doing. They've seen all the stuff you've seen. Kids usually think that they know things the parents don't know. Your parents know. So just hold your place, be a good child, do your studies, prepare for your adult life. You're going to have time to make your own rules, but now during childhood is not the time. Okay. That's what I tell my kids. When my kids tell me that they think my rules stink and stuff like that, I just say, yeah, it's okay. You can disagree with me. You're going to have your own house one day. You'll have your own life to run one day. It's okay. And we'll see what you do when you're 30 years old. So to live according to nature, okay? So that's a pretty easy fable, I think. The mole and her dam. All right. Now, just because I say that it's a pretty easy fable and we have a good moral lesson there, don't forget, if you keep meditating on this and think about it from different perspectives, you can think of more lessons that could be pulled out of it, and you can use it in different ways. So keep thinking about all these, but As far as your assignment goes for this lesson, I think that's a pretty easy one. You agree with me that that's a pretty easy one? Everybody agree that's pretty easy? Okay. The Mole and Her Dam. Pretty easy one. All right, let's go on to the next one here. I think this is a little better. The Falconer and the Partridge. The Falconer and the Partridge. Anybody know what a falconer is? What a falconer is? Notice it doesn't say falcon, right? It says falconer. What is a falconer? Anybody know what a falconer is? Someone who trains falcons. Good. Someone who trains falcons. Well, Asher, that's I'll leave that for you to judge. I doubt it though. One who trains falcons. Good. Yeah. So we know what a falconer is. A falconer is a person who trains falcons. And a partridge is a bird. Okay. So good. So we understand what this is about. Let's read the fable. All right. Let's read the fable together and see what Aesop has to say for us. A partridge. What do you know about a partridge? It's a partridge, a big bird, small bird. What kind of bird is a partridge? Is a partridge like a chicken? Is it like an eagle? A small bird, maybe medium, super tiny bird, small game birds. Okay, so we know it's a small bird, not exactly a prize that somebody would be hunting for, right? Eurasian game bird, that's getting pretty detailed for us. Thank you. They sing well, you say? Okay. So a partridge being taken in the net of a falconer. So a falconer sets a net. He catches a partridge. The partridge being taken in the net of a falconer begged hard of the man to be set free. Right? So the partridge is trapped and is begging the falconer to set her free. So she promises that if he, or he promises, sorry, he promises that if he were let go, he would decoy the other partridges into the net. What does that mean? What does decoy other partridges into the net mean? What does that mean? Decoy, Helen says trick. Trick others into getting into the net. Disguise, trick them into it, trap them. Yeah. So this partridge makes a deal with the falconer and says, hey, if you let me go, I'll make a deal with you. I'll decoy other partridges into the net. Think that's a good thing to do? That's pretty shady, huh? Basically make an agreement to trap other of your kind so that you can escape. That's pretty selfish, right? So he says, hey, if you let me go, I'll help you out and I'll help you catch more partridges. So you might think the falconer thinks that's a good idea, but the falconer says no. No, replied the falconer, I did not mean to spare you. That means I was planning to kill you. I did not mean to spare you, but if I had thought about sparing you, your words would now have condemned you. The scoundrel who, to save himself, offers to betray his friends deserves worse than death. Okay, so the falconer says, I wasn't planning to let you go, but even if I did think about letting you go, what you just said would have made me kill you. Your words would have condemned you. The scoundrel who, to save himself, offers to betray his friends deserves worse than death. So that's the fable of the falconer and the partridge, okay? Now, the moral lesson here is pretty easy because, again, it's stated. The last sentence states the moral lesson. The scoundrel who, to save himself, offers to betray his friends deserves worse than death. Okay? The scoundrel who offers to betray his friends deserves worse than death. You know, sometimes people ask, is one sin worse than another sin, or are all sins equally bad? Aesop would argue here that this is worse, right? He would argue that betraying your friends is worse than anything else, right? Dante in the Divine Comedy, which hopefully you can read one day, teaches that some sins are worse than others. Has to do with who we sin against, what we sin for, and so on. So there are some sins worse than others. Betrayal is presented here as a very terrible sin. I mean, think about it. If I murder someone, what do I deserve as a punishment? If I murder someone, what do I deserve as a punishment? Death, right? Okay. God says that in the Old Testament. We'll read about it in the book of Genesis. It says, a man who sheds blood, by man shall his blood be shed. So governments are supposed to punish people who murder others. But this fable here says that this crime here of betrayal deserves even worse than death. What in the world could be worse than death? Huh? What could be worse than death? Yeah, hell, right? Punishment even beyond death. Maybe torturing, Jude says. Punishment even worse than death. So death, for some crimes, death might not even be that bad of a punishment. And that's one of the problems with the death penalty. There are some people who would like to die, right? Like suicidal people don't care if you threaten them with death. And so you see the death penalty wouldn't even stop those people from committing crimes. Those people deserve even worse than death. There has to be something worse than death. Yeah, crucifying was just a form of torture, right? You can see when governments use torture like crucifixion, what they're trying to do is make people terrified so they don't commit the crimes. Because punishment of crimes, listen up here, punishment of crimes has a couple of different purposes. What are some of the purposes of punishing crimes? What are some of the purposes of punishment? What are some of the purposes of punishment? There's a number of different purposes. To prevent further crimes, good. Okay, that's one purpose, to prevent further crimes. To make an example of the criminal. Yeah, to prevent more crime, to deter crime, to show that it's bad, yeah. Any other ideas to make you not want to do it again? You punish crime. Hold on a second. I saw Zoe wrote something. You punish crime to teach them to do good, so they know if you do something bad will happen to you. Yeah. Okay. What are some other purposes of punishment? To learn from your mistakes. Yeah, if the punishment's not that serious, right? Give you a chance to correct your behavior. There are some other reasons too, other purposes. One is to, people who suffer, listen carefully here for a minute. People who suffer the effects of crimes, imagine if you're a family and your father works to provide for the family and he gets murdered by somebody. Well, now that doesn't help the family, right? To just put the criminal to death. How does that help the family? So now there's more problems that are caused by those crimes than just the crime itself. There's also all kinds of consequences. So we've got to think about lots of stuff. Sometimes, let's say that there's a mother and her son is killed or something like that. She'll desire vengeance. She'll want to know that her son's death was paid for by the murderer. So there's other issues like that to think about. So punishing crime is pretty complicated. Punishing crime, there's a lot more than just punishing the criminal. There's also trying to provide for the people who are affected by the crime. There's also a desire to satisfy a desire for justice or vengeance for the crime. So there's lots of attempt to deter the crime and try to make people stop doing it in the future. So one of the ways that they did that was by, one of the ways that they deterred crime was by trying to make it scary, right? Publicly punishing people. Publicly punishing people. They would have executions right in the middle of town square. Imagine going down to the middle of town and having a big platform set up where they publicly executed criminals, and they would say what the criminals did, and then they would put them to death, right? I think that would be, yeah, Asher's taken out of the meeting, so don't worry about that. So they would punish people publicly so everyone would see them punished. I don't know if you've ever been to a place like Colonial Williamsburg, but you'll know they have stocks set up outside the courthouse. Anybody know what the stocks were for in town outside the courthouse? No, not hanging. Those are called the gallows. Anybody know what the stocks are? Yeah, the stocks are basically, it's either a board on the ground that's like cemented into the ground with chains where they tie a person's ankles up, or it's a wooden headlock where they make somebody stand in it and they lock their hands and their head inside the wooden stocks. No, it's not for slicing your head off. It's just a place where they make criminals stand in public with either their ankles chained to the ground or their head and hands tied up in stocks. And they have to stand there in public in the middle of town outside the courthouse to be humiliated for their sins or for crimes they commit. Okay, so humiliation is another way to punish people, right? So punishing crimes is complicated. There's a lot to think about. Sometimes, doing the simplest things or the worst things like killing somebody would actually not be an effective means of punishment. There's more to it than that. All right, so we read this in this fable here. This falconer says, this scoundrel who betrays his friends to save himself deserves worse than death. So what this leads us to think about, follow me here. It leads us to think about whether or not our experience in this life proves that there must be judgment after death. There must be more punishment available after death than just death, because death is, for many people, death is not even that scary, right? Heroic people don't care about death very much. Many soldiers aren't afraid of dying. People who kill themselves aren't afraid of dying. Obviously, people who use dangerous drugs aren't too worried about dying. So for many people, dying isn't that scary. And if all there was death to punish people, we'd have far worse crimes. If that's all there was the fear of dying or fear of being put in prison, for some people, going to prison might even make their life easier. Their life might be worse outside of prison, okay? When we look at the world, when we look at things that happen, when we look at, crimes that are committed, terrible things that happen, we're left with a question, and listen to me here because this is important. If we just pay attention to experiences people have, we see that either this life is very unjust, or there must be some kind of justice after death. If there's no justice after death, then this life is very unjust. People do terrible things and basically get away with it. Think about it. Think about this. If one man kills 5 men, he takes the lives of 5 men and he's put to death, and he pays for the death of 5 men with 1 death. Does that seem just? Does it seem just for a man to pay with 1 life for the death of 5 men? So that can't possibly be just, right? Putting the man to death would not be sufficient. And you see stuff like that happens all the time. Look at these men, like on 9/11, the men who flew planes into the buildings and killed thousands of people. So the killer dies, he loses his life, but he causes thousands of other people to die, and he pays for it with just his own life. That doesn't make any sense. That's not just. So our experience in this life, our experience in this life, our experience in this life shows us that there must be justice after death, or else so many criminals would get out of this life without punishment that they deserve. And this fable gets us thinking about that, right? A man who saves his own life and causes many others of his friends to die in his place, he deserves far worse than death. Okay, so if we pay attention to the crimes men commit, we see a lot of this going on right now over in Israel and Gaza, right? Lots of terrible things happening. There are many criminals who deserve much worse than death. And if there is no such thing as punishment worse than death, then this life is very unjust. Okay? So the moral of that lesson is very clear. Now, I'd like you to think about something different. All right? Follow me here. We're thinking about this fable from the perspective of the partridge, and we're saying that the partridge deserves worse than death. Okay? But I'd like you to think about it from the perspective of the falconer. Pay attention to me here and listen to my question. Think about the falconer. What does this fable teach us? What does this fable teach us if we think about it through the eyes of the falconer? Okay? What does it teach us if we think through the eyes of the falconer? What does it teach us? Let's say you were in the position of the falconer. What does this fable teach us from the perspective of the falconer? No, the falconer wasn't betraying anybody. Falconer didn't do anything wrong. What does the falconer teach us? Teaches us to be just, right? Now think about this. Think about this. I don't think it teaches us about mercy. Think about this. Listen. Think about what the partridge offered the falconer. The falconer caught one partridge. He could have had one partridge, right? That might have made for a nice lunch. The partridge says, hey, if you let me go, I'll help you get 10 more partridges, right? Or whatever. I'll help you get a bunch more partridges. This falconer, I want you to pay attention to the judgment that he makes. He accepts one partridge instead of many partridges. He accepts one partridge instead of many partridges because he's just, right? He would rather have one partridge with justice than have a bunch of partridges with no justice. He doesn't want to do something evil like that. Notice also, not even would he not do that, but he doesn't accept an evil plan from somebody else to get himself more. Okay? He doesn't accept somebody else's evil plan. So the partridge basically says, listen, I'll sin for you and you can receive the reward. The falconer doesn't accept that reward. So you see, the falconer is an example of a man who is content with what is just, who doesn't accept any unrighteous benefits. Okay, so for example, you could say, well, I work for a company and the company does bad things, but I don't actually do the bad things, but the company does bad things, and then the bad things the company does, that's where my paycheck comes from, but I don't have to do those things, right? I'm not bad. The company's bad. Okay. So the falconer, the falconer is honorable because he accepts less with justice than more with injustice. Okay. And we have to learn to judge like that, right? How many of you would do that? How many of you would be content with having less if it was just than having an opportunity to have more when it's unjust? And I'll give you some good practical examples. With you guys growing up with the internet, there's all kinds of injustice on the internet. Like people downloading videos they're not supposed to have, using pirated movies and things like that, getting music that you didn't pay for, all kinds of stuff, right? And you say, well, I have enough money to buy one video game, or I have enough money to buy one album with music, but I would really like to have 20. And if I go to this website, www.freemusic.com, I can get all of this music, hundreds and hundreds of songs, and I don't have to pay for them. And it's actually illegal. But, I'm not the one stealing the music. The website lets you listen to it. So, I'm willing to listen to it. Well, that's injustice, right? That's injustice. So there are all kinds of examples like that nowadays, where you can get lots and lots of stuff that you really shouldn't have because someone else is doing something unjust, and you have to learn to not accept that stuff. Okay? You have to learn not to accept that. Just because someone else makes it available doesn't mean it's just to take it or use it. Okay? So you've got to learn to say no to those things. It's better to have maybe just one game or one movie that you actually pay for than to have 20 movies that were made available, in a way that's unjust. Okay? Yes, sorry. So, okay? So you understand that? And sometimes it's a difficult temptation, right? Somebody makes it available, so it feels like it's okay. It feels like it's just free, but really it's not just free. Really, it's being made available unjustly. Someone is breaking the law, someone's doing something immoral, and then they offer it for you for free because they want to make money off it. How do you think they make money off stuff like that? If somebody makes a website and they put all kinds of movies available for free on it, big free website, they don't have the rights to make those movies available. How do they make money off it? Yeah, it's called piracy. That's right. Yeah, they make money from ads. Okay, that's right. They make money from ads. Liana says they get our info. That's another possible way. They could collect things like email addresses and things like that. That's true. So they've got something that they're trying to get out of it. Usually it's ads, because they can get paid to run advertisements on their website. So they get 1 million people to come to their website to download movies that they shouldn't be downloading. And they get ad money for those views, it's all unjust. And you participate in it by trying to get those free movies. So the Falconer teaches us the need to be just, right? It's better to have one thing. It's better to have one thing justly than to have lots of stuff unjustly. Yeah, Victor says they're hackers. Yeah, sometimes you go on those sites and you put some information in, or they're able to grab some information, and you end up getting in trouble. Okay, so that's good. So the Falconer teaches us a good lesson about justice. Yeah, that's right, Joseph. They can put malware on your computer. That's right. So the Falconer teaches us to be just. The Partridge shows us an example of an unfaithful betrayer, right? Kind of the worst person, willing to betray his own friends to save his own life. Obviously, that's breaking the golden rule. So we've got a couple different moral lessons in that fable. Okay. Malware is software that can get onto your computer and cause trouble. Now, one of the problems, and this is a warning for you, one of the problems is that, sometimes you hear people complaining that they've got a virus on their computer or something like that. And when you admit that, a lot of times that actually reveals that you're doing stuff on the internet that you shouldn't be doing, because that's how you got the virus in the first place. So it's not something that you should be proud of, to run around telling people you have viruses on your computer. You might have viruses on your computer because you're on websites you shouldn't be on. Okay? So we learn a good lesson from the Falconer. And again, that's a very important lesson today. It's very hard to live like the Falconer. It's very hard to say no to something because it's not just. And there's nothing wrong with wanting things, right? But you've got to be willing to pay the price to have them justly. I'll give you a quick example. How many of you listen to the classical Catholic radio station? Anybody listen to that classical Catholic radio station that's on the website? You'll notice that there's lots and lots of music on that website, right? There's lots of music on that website, and you're all allowed to listen to it for free. And you might wonder, like, well, how does Mr. Michael get all that music? How is he allowed to play all this music for free? And the answer is, I have to pay for it. I have to pay for a license. I pay for a license that allows me to play that music. I have to buy all the music. So all the music that you hear on there, I have to pay for the music first. And then I've also got to pay a licensing fee to allow others to listen to it. So that's how that kind of thing is done justly. You have to get permission and licenses to do that. So you have to make sure you do things justly. Okay. But it's very tempting because you go on a website and there's just free stuff all over the place. And you say, oh, cool, look at this. You know, this movie is out in the movie theater right now, and this website has it available for free. Well, something's probably sketchy there. And you've got to learn to say no to that kind of stuff. Just because others make it free doesn't mean it's right for you to use. Okay. So that's the fable of the falconer and the partridge. All right. Plus, it makes you'll feel a lot better if you know you're doing things justly. You'll have a good conscience, right? A lot of times when people criticize things like listening to music or they criticize playing video games, it's not really the games or the music that's bad, right? It's not really the games that are bad. It's not really the music that's bad, not really the videos that are bad. But what you'll notice is that many kids who get into that stuff get into all of this unjust stuff. They get into all of this bad stuff. They're downloading songs that are that shouldn't be downloaded. They're on websites getting free videos or games that they shouldn't have. So it leads to a desire for more and more and more. And then you end up committing all kinds of sinful activities. And you say, hey, what's wrong with video games? There's nothing. Well, there's nothing wrong with the game, but there's something wrong with stealing, right? So you see how it leads you into more troubles, okay? It leads you into more troubles, okay? Nothing wrong with buying things justly, right? But most of the time, people who want to just play games and stuff, they're not the kind of people who want to buy things justly. That's part of the problem, okay? So that's all for the falconer and the partridge. Any questions about this fable or the last fable? No, I think they're two pretty simple fables, but important fables, right? The first fable about the mole was, don't act contrary to nature. And that's a good application for you as kids. Don't think you know more than your parents. They have the same senses you have. They've already had your childhood experiences. They're not dumb. They know what they're doing. They may not be perfect, but that's none of your business. So that's the first fable. And then the second fable here, the falconer and the partridge. The moral, Daniel, you asked, what's the moral? It's the last sentence. The scoundrel who offers to betray his friends deserves worse than death. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It's up to you guys. We can do the next fable or we can stop there. What do you want to do? We only have like 12 minutes left, though. Probably should stop there. Let's stop there. The next fable is a little longer, too. So let's stop there. We did 2 fables. We've got some time left. So we'll just stop there. Any questions about this or any fable? Yeah, I don't think we could cover the whole fable in 12 minutes. All right, so that's all for today. A little shorter meeting. So it's 1:48-ish, 1:50-ish. We'll wrap up there. So if you'd like to leave, now listen, what I recommend is that you go and get these assignments finished while it's all fresh in your head, right? Go reread the fable quickly and complete the assignment and submit it. Why did he choose a falconer? Just because the falconer is a person who works with birds, who traps birds and things, right? Wouldn't make much sense to say like a sailor caught a partridge in a net. Okay. So go get the assignments done, get that work turned in, get credit for it, and we'll keep moving forward with Aesop's Fables each week. All right. So I'm going to stop the recording there, and then we can chat about any questions you have. So I'll cut that off. If you're going to leave, you're free to go now. I'm not going to introduce any new stuff. Okay.